Hiya, it's Claire. While I'm here in these beautiful woods with the river flowing by beside me, below me, I found this little place to sit on this tree, which is like a seat right on the edge, so I've got to be careful. I thought I'd just share an example of fairy shapeshifting from the walk that I had on the branch wants to come in and listen. I'm listening. A walk that I had, about 5 years ago with my son. He's now 14, so he's about 9 then. And we went to some woods near a reservoir. And Ethan intuitively picked up a forked stick and said, this would be a good way to find some fairies. It's a fairy finding stick. And little did he know that I'm seeing the moss above me with a little face. Little did he know that that's a way that people used to dance, but he was holding it the other way around, holding the stick with the Y pointing out rather than holding it like a hazel rod. And he held the 2 forks. Anyway, so we walked past this part of the wood that was quite dark along the path, and a lot of it's pine trees in this particular area. A lot of pine trees are blown over, obviously with the wind, so their roots weren't very rooted in the soil. The soil I felt was probably quite poor in that area. And we were looking down through, and there were several tree stumps of trees that had fallen over that were rotted, that looked like figures. And there was this particular figure we could see, and I couldn't believe it. I looked and looked again, and Ethan could see it as well. It was like a fairy person, how I describe a fairy person, with a pointed hat, and he looked like a wizard type figure. He was quite tall, probably 6-7 foot tall, and he was holding a branch like a wand, and he had one of his hands resting against one of the pine trees. And I intuitively felt in my heart, and Ethan felt it as well, said, oh look, he's healing the tree. And we both felt that this particular fairy, and there are other figures we could see as well, were all there helping this part of the wood because of what had happened with the trees blowing over. And we instinctively felt that this part of the wood didn't fit in with the rest of the place, like those trees weren't suited there, and the fairies were trying to heal that part of the landscape. So I took some photos, and in one particular photo I actually captured what we could both see with our eyes, which was this figure with features of brown skinned, wearing a jacket that looked, the way that I saw it, it looked very sort of like a revolutionary era, French Revolutionary era jacket, and his hat was very like French Revolution era sort of hat. Trying to find a picture of it so you know what I'm talking about. So I felt like his clothing was very symbolic as well, like he was there, like the fairies stand for helping nature, for almost the guardians. He was like a guardian of nature, and liberating this place, like they were doing the French Revolution. He was liberating this area. So the fact that we saw him in this form, and his face was humanoid but almost like dog-like at the same time. It's almost like a part or sort of a dog appearance to his face, and his ears were like dog's ears as well. That's the way I saw it anyway. lovely ears. And I've drawn in since. I'll post my picture, based on what I can see and what I intuitively saw, my mind's eye and my third eye. So, and then over the years, I've gone back to that place at least once a year, and gradually this figure has disappeared and been subsumed by the undergrowth. It's like the fairies took over this place and all the undergrowth grew up around it almost to protect it. Ethan and I felt it was a portal, that these trees falling over had opened up a portal in the land, and the fairies were trying to heal it. And then a few months ago I went back there, and whoever owns the forestry company had cut down, they cleared that space completely, so all the light was like flooding in, and it's full of light, and all those trees that have fallen over have gone. They've been clearing them, and it's almost like, and all those figures we saw have gone, they've disappeared. The undergrowth is gone, and it's like the landscape has got the chance to renew. So yeah, it's really beautiful, and it still reminds Ethan of that, and he still remembers that day. We went back again and had some similar experiences again there. So that's an example of fairy shapeshifting, that they can take these forms in nature, as well as people seeing them as actual little figures, independent of natural forms. That's how I've experienced them, as part of natural forms, and they embody those forms, those trees, those rocks, the landscape, the moss, the plants, and do their work in those places, and we receive those images. The way I feel it is just by receiving those images, with our imagination, with our intuition, is a way of them communicating with us about the importance of these places and how they're helping them, and what they're all about, what the fairies are about. And they're not just about entertaining us, they're about being guardians of the landscape. And that's where these stories of fairies being quite fierce, and they're not all what we class as nice, because Ethan and I, we couldn't, that day we felt there was a barrier there. We couldn't get anywhere near what we could see, these figures and the trees. We tried, and there were brambles everywhere, and we couldn't get anywhere close. So it was definitely a protected space, and from that I learned that if you have this feeling about a place that there's no way through, that you should go through it, then to follow that and respect it, because I think that's when people haven't respected these barriers that fairies have around places, because they're doing important work, they're healing it, whatever they're doing, then that's when people get into trouble, so have accidents and get lost. I don't think that's necessarily the fairies doing all the time. It's more to do with the landscape, and that for whatever reason it's not suitable for people to be in those places, and it needs to be wild. So I wanted to share that with you. I'm aware I don't have much battery on my phone, but I had to do that here in this beautiful place, which is just so full of fairies, and it's incredible energy here. Sending lots of love. Okay, bye.